Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to have a great conversation about the end times. And today we're talking about this thing called disclosure. Now, if you have not been paying attention, disclosure has to do with people demanding that the government finally come clean and say, yes, we know that there are UFOs and there are aliens. And for a very long time, the government has been rather slow to do that. Although it's interesting, back in the 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s, they were quite open about it. And they're like, yeah, we know that there's UFOs. And then suddenly, mom's the word, right? Everything was Project Blue Book. And then they weren't talking about it. And if you believed in that, you were wacko and all this different stuff. Well, turns out around 2017, they started talking about it again. And just recently, there was actually a congressional hearing putting all of this on the record. Nothing especially new, but now it's on the record for what it's worth. And to help us get through that and to really sort through it, I am excited because we have a special guest. We've got Mike Stibs. He's the creative director over at Camp Hermon, which you guys should check out. It's a great podcast. So Camp Hermon. I think you'll really enjoy the stuff that they talk about. A lot of weird stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Mike, so glad that you're here, and you're up in Montana. Is that right?
Yeah, Northwest Montana. So we mountains are the best place to be, especially in these times.
Yes, indeed. So you can run to the hills, right? So
exactly. I'm already here. So
yeah. So tell everybody about Camp Hermon. They might not have heard about that.
Yeah.
What do you guys do over there?
Yeah, so Camp Hermon is a podcast about some of like the weirder stuff that's going on within our culture, and we tend to keep coming back to this alien / UFO topic, and we're really starting to hash it out just even between us, and so just so people know, Chris Price and Tori Peterson, they host the actual podcast. I'm behind the scenes. I help produce. And what we're doing now is my main role as creative director is I'm starting to create a docu-series that will be kind of based loosely around the podcast, but it will be going in the direction of this alien topic. And, I love how you said it at first, Doug. We don't claim to have all the answers, especially when it comes to the alien topic. It's really hard to have all the answers because there's so many different perspectives to view this from. There's so many different theories and all of this. So really what we're going to do is we're going to put a bunch of those theories under the microscope in this docuseries. So Chris Price, Tori Peterson, they're out doing the podcast every week. They're doing a great job. And then I'm working on the long-term vision with this docu-series, and we're going to have like the first 3 episodes by Christmas.
That's awesome. Why did you guys name it Camp Hermon, or Hermon, if you want to say it in English? But
I didn't have any say in that part of it. I wasn't really necessarily a part of the vision at that time, but right now, the way that we're looking at this Camp Hermon thing, this is where Jesus, proclaimed in front of his disciples, that he was the Messiah, that he told, Peter had that revelation, who do you say that I am? And it's like, you're the Messiah, dude. Right. And Jesus was like, yeah, on this rock, we're gonna, build our church off of that revelation. And so we're right there. That's where we want to be. We want to be shaping the narrative and bringing, and I don't mean to say a new narrative, but we're ready to bring the true biblical narrative through a supernatural divine counsel worldview. And my goal personally has always been is I won't stop until I'm dead or my pastor can talk about it in front of his congregation.
I love that.
About this stuff I want it to be, just common knowledge, of understanding, exactly what Jesus was accomplishing. It wasn't, obviously he died for our sins. That's cool. Now let's go on to the deep stuff of God. There's a whole story there that I think, you know, podcasts like Camp Hermon, like Derek Gilbert's, your guys' stuff, we're starting to try to put that collectively, we're trying to put that story together, and it's a lot more interesting than we've been taught in Sunday school.
So a lot of people would say, you know, who cares? You know, Jesus died for my sins. I'm saved by grace. I just want to live a pretty good life. Why do I need to know any of this other stuff? I mean, who cares, right?
That's my mom. She's like, Mike, stop talking about aliens. She texts me, what is this alien stuff? And I said, Mom, have you ever thought about, you know, Jesus, Matthew 24? Like, you read that whole narrative, and if you don't have the context of a supernatural worldview, you might just think, you know, okay, it's cool, he's warning his disciples. But he says, be careful that nobody deceive you. There's going to be false prophets. There's going to be false teachers that are going to get you off of the path. You know, it's not, Jesus didn't say that, but that's what's going to happen is that there's going to be these false prophets, false teachers that are going to get us off the path. They're going to mix in Christianity with worldly stuff. And we have to carry that narrative. And right now, the narrative is that, you know, as far as disclosure goes, and the whole world is kind of talking about it, Jesus is still not even still right there. He's the main character in this story. And I feel that it's important for us to, I think we should speculate. I think that we should talk about the possible deceptions that can come out of this whole disclosure movement. There's a lot. And at the end of the day, Doug, you know, I might be wrong. You might be right. Somebody else might be right. Whatever the case is, we're together. This should be a conversation.
Question for you, Mike. Have y'all ever done a show, a podcast? And Doug and I, we differ quite a bit sometimes on some prophecy stuff, but we both believe and are pretty adamant about it that this deception is going to be, we are your gods. We created you, the panspermia theory, in other words, and you can now evolve and become more like us. Just take this little jabby jab thing or take this mark, and then by doing so, you can then become a god. Have y'all had a podcast on that topic before? Or what might the deception be? Why, you know, like you just said with your mom, why should we care? Well, I think we should care because, you know, it might not have mattered 100 years ago or 300 years ago, but with everything converging and aligning and central digital currency and you know, the UN agenda and the alien, I don't think they're all being pushed by coincidence. So I guess my question is, if y'all already had some podcast on that topic as far as how it might relate to end times.
Yeah, so we had Tori and Chris had yours truly right here. Doug Hamp came on the show. Totally killed it, by the way. I mean, I listened to that whole podcast.
Yes.
Great
that every
stuff. But you know, it seems like how you kind of mentioned a couple different things there. There does seem to be like three different spheres that are coming together, right? And so on one sphere, you have disclosure and just the alien topic in general. Then you've got the political agenda, and then you have the whole what was I going to say? So yeah, we have the political agenda, you have the disclosure agenda, and they're literally coming together. And the other one is the financial agenda as well, because it's all starting to converge into this one narrative. Because politically with the World Economic Forum and with these newer politicians that are coming out, and there's going to be a whole new generation of politicians in a couple of years here. And they're talking about universal basic income. And they're talking about how we need to give money to the people so they can chill. And, work on their desires and their arts and stuff. And we should be able to do that with artificial intelligence. And they're getting people ready for that. And that is just the golden age repackaged, and they're trying to push it in that direction. And then you've got the alien agenda, which ultimately it pushes it in that direction too, because they are, generally speaking, they are the ones going to save us, help get that higher consciousness where we don't have to work and toil. By the way, you can't usurp the curse that Adam and Eve brought in. Only Jesus can do that, but we've got to make it to the other side before that happens, right? We can't usurp that consequence per se. And then,
do you guys ever address and discuss, like, say, some of the new age? And I did listen to a few minutes of a podcast, and it's not new whatsoever, but like Alice Bailey and Blavatsky and what we're seeing, like with the guy, London Real guy, David Icke, and some of the stuff he's been talking about for years, but coming through this new age lens. Do y'all ever address that and how, I'm assuming you know who I'm talking about when I say David Icke.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But do y'all ever go in and critique some of them and or some of their discussions, or say, hey, we need to be worried and concerned about this, because I see that being the false light. Like General Flynn might as well have been reading in his prayer Alice Bailey's prayer to the light. And here he is, one of Trump's, speaking of politics, right-hand man, and the Q thing about the light. And I'm just worried about a false awakening as people are starting to wake up to this and the aliens and all the evil, that they're ripe for deception in another direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we haven't gone into any of that yet, but I do know that David Icke, he has within the same network that he's on, is it the Gaia network or something like that?
London Real does a lot of theirs. They did the Plandemic movie, and they Alex Jones is on there a lot. So it's conspiracy theory land. But a lot of the stuff that they talked about, it ended up being true.
No, absolutely. I mean, we seem to be going into an age that where everything, every conspiracy theory that's ever been talked about up until now, it seems to be actually coming true, including aliens. There were some memes made during the event a couple years ago that showed the planet Earth and then showed aliens waiting. Like, is it our turn to come? Right? Is it our turn? Because the whole world's been turned upside down, and all of a sudden, we're living in a time where maybe it's getting disclosed for what it truly is. Now, I'm not completely sold on that, but there's a lot of different players shaping that narrative. And one of the main UFO guys out there that's shaping the narrative is Dr. Stephen Greer. And he goes right into the Icke stuff because he's all new age, transcendental meditation. But yet at the same time, Dr. Stephen Greer has hosted several disclosure events. He's got whistleblowers waiting that should have been at that congressional hearing that didn't show up. And we can go into some of his stuff because it definitely ties in with the congressional hearing that just went down.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. So let's talk about that congressional hearing. So, what was the essence of it? I know that you listened to it many times. It's on my to-do list. But I kind of had a feeling, I'm like, I don't think they're going to say anything new. I think it'll be just now on the record. But what are your thoughts? You are the expert on this.
Yeah, so really, if you listen to David Grush's interview with News Nation when he came out as a whistleblower for that the government retrieved crashed UFOs, if you heard that interview, you've heard everything. So all of that came out, but there were some, let me say, in my opinion, there were some discrepancies in his testimony, and I'm gonna point them out on the Camp Hermon news special that I'm putting together. He seemed to answer a question about. He was asked a question by one of the Congress people. Is the U.S. government in contact with an extraterrestrial civilization? And he said, as I previously stated, yes, and it started in the 1930s. Okay. He's asked the question again, and he says, I can't talk about that in an open forum. Something is a little bit off with him. I'm not willing to say that he is working on behalf of a disinformation campaign, but I definitely take that into account. But yeah, so if you heard it, basically what came out was, from his point of view, is that the government is in possession of extraterrestrial, he calls it non-human aircraft. Okay, we kind of already suspected that already, and then that they have non-human biological, bodies in their possession as well. And so the two biggest things that we've been wondering all of this time, he is coming out and saying that the government has them, but at the same time, we do have to. For me, I'm a skeptic. I always think everybody's lying until you can prove me wrong the other way. Yep. But he, it's all third party info on his part. Now, where I'll give him credit on that, is he was a part of the UAP task force that started out of the 2017 stuff. And then, this is just my opinion, but he's interviewing all these people, and he starts to see a pattern start coming about. And then he's like, oh my gosh, like they're hiding this. Like I'm supposed to investigate this, and they're hiding it even from me, as I'm talking as Grush. And something seems weird about that, about the fact that, he was working for the UAP task force, and now he's whistleblowing. I don't know, but yeah, it's nothing groundbreaking really within that. They promised that it was going to be historical, and I've heard some commentators say that this is like the biggest announcement ever. Like, this is the biggest historical thing ever, and not yet. I just gotta say, in my opinion, not yet, because what if a disinformation campaign, and this is where we can get into Stephen Greer, what if a disinformation campaign was at play here? Okay. Now, I think, I agree with what was said earlier about this alien race coming to the earth and saving us. I definitely think that fits in to some of the ambiguities within the book of Revelation. If we're in that time right now, I definitely see that. But let's just imagine that we're not in that time yet. And then there's like a huge psyop to just change how people think. Right. And that's where we can kind of get into Stephen Greer, if you guys want to go there, because he's an insider. I don't like the guy because he's new age and he's leading people away from Christ, but he has a scenario that I believe Christians need to know, because he's an insider, and that his scenario needs to be on the table, in my opinion.
And I've always looked at like a drip, 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 and right. And maybe now what they're doing, whether it be partially true information or more information being released, or as you just said, a psyop, I see the faucet being turned up no matter what. Yeah. By the government, by media, by everything. It's more. You're no longer an absolute nutcase if you believe in other dimensional beings or aliens. You're not considered completely crazy. So, yeah. I mean, Let's be honest.
Well, and part of this whole thing is to figure out what is true and what's not. And there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, whatever we want to call it, whoever's doing what. It's hard to put, our finger on that entirely. And of course, that's the whole thing about deception, right? Is that there's always some truth mixed in with lies. And I kept thinking about your mom, Mike. She represents so many people that think that all this alien stuff is crazy. But I think what we have to do is simply translate it for people and say, look, moms of the world, what we're trying to get at here is if we go back into the Bible, there were no aliens, quote unquote, but there were gods, right? There were lots of gods. And these so-called gods we know to be fallen angels or demons, however you want to slice and dice that. But, they were malevolent beings that were in rebellion to God. And they took on various forms. The sons of God came in the days of Noah. They took the daughters of men and they created this hybrid race. That is the primary reason God destroyed the world. Maybe we should take note of that because that was like a big event. I don't know. It just seems like a really big event. Okay. Then we have this other thing called the Tower of Babel. Is God against skyscrapers? Is that the problem? Or were they trying to create Bab-El, which is a gateway to the gods? That's literally what it means. And that's what it says in the ancient Mesopotamian literature, is that they were trying to create a gateway to the gods. Is that the reason that God himself intervened, stepped in, and did something drastic? Because humanity was going down a path that was leading to utter destruction. And God's like, I can't have you been doing that. That's a bridge too far, right? I mean, God steps in when it's a bridge too far. He let us detonate a nuclear bomb. That wasn't a bridge too far. He let us do all kinds of stupid stuff. Those weren't bridges too far. But the Nephilim and the Tower of Babel, those were bridges too far. And then, Jesus shows up. He goes to Mount Hermon. He's at the base of it, and he talks about the gates of Hades. Then he goes to the top of the mountain, and he transfigures there. And, I think that he was stopping Satan and the gang from doing something else, which was opening the gates of Hades at that time. And I think that was delayed, which we see in the book of Revelation. So, we just have to say, okay, what's really going on here? And we don't have to make a hard case for it. The TV series, Ancient Aliens, they've already made the case for us, right? The movie Eternals. I mean, talk about on the nose. They're like, look, this god Marduk, he was actually, an ancient alien, So all these so-called ancient gods, Eternals just said, no, they're not actually gods. They're advanced alien beings that have been living here watching over us in case something bad happens.
Yeah, Eternals had a major Mormon slant because there seemed to be a bunch of creator gods,
Yes.
Good catch on that one.
I mean, it definitely had some Mormon slanted view of God.
Right.
But I watched it just for entertainment value and to see what they're trying to pump the masses with.
Right.
Me, Doug and I have both said this before, that when we watch the Avengers Endgame, we're essentially watching a twisted mirror image of what Revelation actually says, that there is God, Yeshua, Jesus, is coming back to judge the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're the Avengers and the supernatural human abilities and the other beings are all going to gather together to fight this mean, evil God that wants to. Yeah. And Yeshua's not coming to destroy the earth. There's going to be some judgment. but
he's really coming to save it, right? Yeah. I want to take a comment and kind of question from my friend Brad Myers. He says alien encounters by Missler and Eastman in their book say the demonic 3 frog-like beings will take the form of aliens. And I know that Brad actually did a lot of the research for that book. And so he's being super generous there. But he did a lot of the research himself. And I think he's right. When you look at that passage, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Now, it's interesting. So in Corrupting the Image Volume 3, I talk about this guy, Craig Campobasso, who's created the ET Almanac. And he's convinced that there are about 94 different species of alien beings. One of them are called the Draconians. And the Draconians just happen to have this frog-like appearance. So think of a man, but kind of a frog's head, sort of froggy arms, and sort of whatever that, the gills and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out that these Draconians just don't play very well. It turns out that they're cold-blooded creatures whose skin is made of scales, scutes, and bone plates. Their most common coloration is brown, beige, and green. They have a foul, pungent smell, an odor that is designed to weaken its opponent in battle. They feel superior over every race, especially humans. and they just happen to come from the star Sirius. I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. And, Draconian, hello, dragon. I mean, wow, you're really hiding it from us there.
In the conspiracy theories, I do believe they hit on a lot right, even if they're not coming at it from a biblical standpoint.
Right.
I mean, I don't want anybody, unless they really know scripture, to ever go listen to David Icke. Okay. That's dangerous ground. But for some of the stuff he puts out there, if it was through a biblical lens and faith in Yeshua, then man, but it's not. It's he thinks we're going to overcome and be one spirit consciousness or something. I get collective consciousness type crap. So
that's a great point, though. I mean, it's in line with a lot of different guys out there that are forming this alien narrative, and Stephen Greer says this same thing too. And he's got a theory, like I said, that should be on the table, and that is he claims that Werner von Braun's assistant that worked with him, and she did work with him, I forget her name, but that on his deathbed, Werner von Braun revealed to her that the last card that the military would play is a fake alien invasion. That they would attack countries in these UFOs that they have designed, and then they'll blame it on an ET civilization. Now, where this theory takes a twist is Stephen Greer will say, well, yes, that is true that the U.S. government's going to do that, but that doesn't mean that aliens and this race of aliens, they're very much there, and they know that the human race they know America is going to perpetuate that. So he believes that they will somehow reveal themselves during this time, and this will be like the government trying to put on like a false flag scenario where a nation gets attacked and they blame it on extraterrestrials. But Stephen Greer thinks that the extraterrestrials are actually there. And then he says that he claims that he's in contact with many different civilizations, and that he says that they are here, but they are benevolent and they want to help us reach what?
Yes.
Higher
yes.
level of consciousness.
It's flipping the script. And that's a great segue, because we're going to take a commercial break here, because I'm going to show Regenesis Code. Okay. So everyone hold on. This is an amazing book that you really need to check out. All right. Yeah. So, in the Regenesis code, and if you've read Corrupting the Image, you know the basic plot that we're following. The script is flipped, and this is where I think that many prophecy teachers have completely left out the two witnesses. Like they're just like, yeah, these are these weird guys that show up and they kind of do their thing, but not really a big deal. I think they are a big deal. And I think if we kind of take all of the data that we've been looking at, all this UFO stuff, all the projections and movies that we've been seeing, talk about the script being flipped. And Eternals, that's what was just like so on the nose, right? The ancient gods, Marduk, and all these different dudes, they were the good guys who were actually protecting us from the bad guys, right? I mean, that's the basic scenario. And so what you're talking about, Stephen Greer, and actually saying that the aliens that are out there that are among us or whatever, they're the benevolent, they're the good guys. I think that will be the basic script that the world is going to be handed. And the two witnesses who come with supernatural powers, out of this world kind of powers, they're going to be the bad guys. When Moses and Aaron went into Egypt, were they the good guys or the bad guys? Depends whose team you were on. If you were an Egyptian, they were the bad guys, right? Here are these hostile dudes coming into our country, telling us what to do, and we don't like it, and we're not going to play. And, oh, okay, you've got powers. We can turn sticks into serpents as well. Who cares? And we can call lice up from the earth, which I don't know why you do that. And we can turn the river to blood. Again, I don't know why you do that, but, anything you can do, we can do too, is the basic scenario. And I think the world is going to be like, you know what? We don't like these two witness dudes, and we don't like their message at all. And this is why the world as a whole is going to rejoice when they're finally dead. And who's going to kill them? The good aliens, right? And that'll be Satan and his dudes who are going to say, hey, we've been here. We've been watching over you and just kind of letting you do your thing, evolve as you will. But this really required us to step in because your poor human weapons are puny and couldn't do anything against these two witness guys. And so we had to step in and we're here to help. So take comfort. I think that's the basic scenario. And that's the essence of Regenesis code for those that want to have it in a nutshell. But it is available on Amazon. It's available on YouTube if you want to listen to the audiobook read by yours truly. Nice. And we really want to make my co-author and I, Mornay Theoneson, we want to make this into just a huge series because we think this is a story that needs to be told in such a way that people can really enjoy the story, but then the theology is woven in there, so it's very subtle. That's the basic idea. So, but go on. I mean, I'm loving hearing about the the disclosure, and I don't know. Were people like, oh my goodness, I've never heard this stuff before? Or what was the general consensus?
Well, I think during the congressional hearing, there was a few things that I took away from that reinforced some of my views, and several of the Congress people mentioned that they don't trust anything that comes out of Washington, D.C. So there is total discord in our government, and talk about it in a public hearing, right? So nothing new there. It just goes to show that we are not bipartisan on anything, and this UFO thing will turn into a political. I think they'll be used for political leverage. The other thing that I walked away with out of that was they asked Grush about where he thought that these beings came from, right? Because he wouldn't call them extraterrestrial. He said, I want to leave his words were, I want to leave the aperture open of who they are, where they come from exactly, right? And he mentioned that he was in conversation with other people within the UAP task force, and they had theories about if the holographic universe theory is correct, could they, could they cross over dimensions? And that was one thing that they were, I think, at least theorizing on. And there were some things in his language that made me think that at least he thought that if they did crash, that it was an accident and they didn't mean to come over to our dimension. Now, I'm really kind of stretching on that one if you listen to it, but he was called out, and the question is, well, if there's an extraterrestrial race and they have the ability to get here from, let's say, billions of miles away, they would just come here and crash. And I get that, right? Like that, how would they just crash? But you got to, and then he comes back and he says, well, there's always mission failure. You know what I mean? And then he kind of goes into this holographic universe theory, which we've been talking about this for a while now as a Christian community, about the idea that these are multi-dimensional beings, but he kind of made it seem like, oh, it could have been an accident that they crossed over into our dimension. Maybe they're, I don't know exactly how that would happen, if their technology failed or if they came across, a Stargate / wormhole, or, if the dimensions are right by each other, if somehow there was a tear, and that's what we're seeing when we see those UFOs. And I thought that was a little bit suspect, because it seems to me that, yeah, maybe they were theorizing it, but even more so, maybe that they were trying to be able to explain it away when this false flag happens, if it does happen, that they're not transgressing, but they're diversing, going from one dimension to the next, traversing, and then they're able to do that. And, I don't know.
It's really interesting that they would talk about interdimensional beings versus simply extraterrestrial. That gets you into the spiritual realm that a lot of people are not comfortable talking about. But I know that George Knapp, has been talking about that same thing. He suggests that they exist behind a thin psychical dimensional membrane, which the Bible calls the veil. Hello. So it's pretty interesting, Scott.
Well, we see the example with Elisha when the servant is freaking out, and Elisha tells the servant, there are more with us than there are against us, and the servant has no clue what he said. Obviously Elisha already had that ability to see into that realm at that time. He could see into that other realm, and the servant had no ability until Elisha prayed, opened his eyes, and then the servant could then see these other dimensional beings, these warriors, if you will, on the side of good, on the side of God. And so it's heaven isn't, I don't get into shapes and things like that, but heaven is not this, somewhere in the distant outer space. In other words, heaven is literally this dimension right above us at the tree level, where birds fly. It's not like my dad, who's deceased now. I believe he's in Sheol awaiting resurrection, but it's not like you're in some ethereal third heaven out, like outer space or even beyond outer space. So I think that's a lot of it. It comes from some of the theology we might have learned, over the years, things that are just repeated, like my mom's in heaven. Well, have you actually crossed over to the other dimension yet, into a certain, so I think that's a lot of it is, and some of our brothers, I'll call them brothers, who do really, really get a little too serious about cosmology. They seem to think that because there are others that believe in a more heliocentric globe model, that this is going to be part of the deception, that these aliens are coming from outer space. But I just have always downplayed that, because if we look at them as interdimensional beings, which is what they are, powers and principalities in this other dimension, then it doesn't matter about shapes. It doesn't matter. I mean, there are entities and spirits, I think, that swirl around us. There are angels that we can't see. We don't have those eyes to see into that realm most of the time. Some people do have that gift, if you will, or my wife who can see things sometimes, she would call it a curse. So I don't want that ability to see that.
Mike, do you think there's a greater acceptance of this other realm? People may not call it the spiritual realm, but some other interdimensional. I mean, does that seem to be taking more of a mainstream bent for some people?
Yeah, and I, regardless, definitely think that. I mean, regardless of what is happening within disclosure right now, the consequence of it is, yes, people are needing to open their minds a little bit and understand that it's not just us, right? And that's why us Christians, we're talking about this and we're like, hey guys, look at us, listen to us, because we've been saying that the whole time. It's not just humans, that play into the story of life per se. And so, yeah, and going back to Stephen Greer regarding, a different dimension, he has something, he calls it the CE5 application for your smartphone. Okay. CE5 is, it's in the categorization of encounters. It's a close encounter of the fifth kind, which means that you actually interacted with one of these beings. Okay. So no joke. I have the app on my phone. I it's for research purposes. But he is teaching people to talk to these entities. Now, if let's just say that, okay, Stephen Greer is talking to entities, right? And they're saying that we're from a different star system. We've been going back to your narrative, which I love so much. We've been watching you and we haven't stepped in yet but we're going to have to, because you guys are getting there, but we want to help you guys. And that's the message that Stephen Greer is vehemently spitting out right now in the midst of all of this government type of disclosure. So he'll say that Lou Elizondo, David Grush, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, they're all part of the same disinformation team. And they want you to believe that this is a national security issue. They want you to believe that they're malevolent. And then he's saying, but they're not. They are good. So what does that make Stephen Greer? He's somebody who is talking to these gods, aliens, demons, fallen angels, whatever you want to categorize them as. He's talking to them, and then he is speaking to the world on behalf of them. What does that make him? An alien prophet.
Mm-hmm.
He is literally trying to convince people that these beings are full of love. All they want to do is help us. And he's got some major celebrities on board. And he is getting more podcast time now with different podcasters. I listened to him. He was on a podcast, SRS, the Ryan Show. Sean, I say no, but we'll just Sean Ryan. He's like this military dude. He claims to have had an encounter with God and he's going Christian, but yet he had this dude, Stephen Greer. And the podcast, by the way, has over 1 million views. And Stephen Greer is perpetuating this alien gospel. They're going to help us. I mean, it seems like this is all unfolding. Like it seems like every conspiracy theory that we've been speculating on as a Christian community, it's like all true. But is it though? Maybe not, I don't know. It's crazy. And so that's where I just think that within the deception, there's like smaller deceptions.
Yeah.
And I do know that Satan has been playing the long game all along.
Yep.
And I look at my daughter and she's 9 months old. And I think to myself, she was born into a world that is now acknowledging non-human entities being present. Now, whether that's true or not, it's a part of the narrative. That freaks me out, because by the time she's 50, 60, 70, there's going to be a whole generation of people that believe that.
Yeah. I'll say this, one of my twins who's 18, he amazes me about the conversations we're having along this line right now. Now, he's got a dad that 100% is biblical truth, and he really can't even deny it. He just, at this point in time, I think he just doesn't want to commit or obey. So a little bit of 18-year-old rebel in him, but the amount of information that 18-year-old has been able to learn, some of it wackadoodle theories, I will say, but because I always ask him what he's been learning, so we can at least talk about it, so I can see what type of garbage is coming in.
You know, it reminds me of the Twilight Zone, where the aliens show up and they have a book called "To Serve Humans," and some linguists are able to translate the title, and it says "To Serve Humans," and so they're like so excited, like, wow, they're here to serve us, right? What a wonderful, magnanimous thing, you know. And then as some people are getting on the spaceship to go back to the alien planet to see all the great stuff there, you know, they're being corralled onto the spaceship, and this woman shouts out, she's like, "John, don't get on the spaceship. We translated the rest of the book. It's a cookbook," you know. And then the alien's like, "Get on there. It's too late," you know. And you know, and on the way back, they're trying to fatten them up so they can eat them for dinner when they get back, you know. But I think that's the basic essence here, is that, you know, there's this idea that, which Greer seems to be really pushing, is that these are benevolent beings. They're here to help us. And he's not the only guy that's saying this. There's a lot of people that have this same viewpoint. You know, they're here to help us. Clearly, if they were here to hurt us, they would have hurt us by now, right? That's the basic scenario. So therefore, they must be here to help us. And when you hear the different leaks of the alien technology that's made its way into Skunkworks and other of the, you know, the special ops projects and whatever, the idea here is that, hey, you know what? We kind of like this technology. We like the stuff that's coming our way. And, you know, and it is really interesting. You know, I actually wanted to ask your opinion about this, Mike. So if there really, something really did happen at Roswell, if there really are so-called alien bodies and there are spaceships or whatever, how would we account for that? If, you know, we generally think that these are fallen angels, demons, spiritual beings, how are they able to actually have manifested craft and or bodies that are still around?
Wow, that's a huge question. And so whatever I say next, it's only a speculation. You know, but if and I do believe that this will be part of the greater deception, however that plays out, is okay. Let me first say this, right? So when Jesus says that if it were that this deception is going to be so great that if possible, even the elect would be deceived, right? So there's kind of some room there for us to speculate exactly what this deception, how great it's going to be that even God's chosen people, you, me, Scott, even we, if it were possible, could be deceived by it. So you got, let's say you got an alien craft, you've got the alien bodies, and then you've got your alien prophet, a guy like Stephen Greer, a guy like David Icke, a guy like Rael. If you've never heard of him, he is crazier than everybody else. And then they're saying, well, we told you so. right? We're not alone. These aliens are here, right? That will trip up a lot of people, a lot of self-professing Christians that don't know God. They're just saying I'm a Christian, but they don't really know him. Okay. And that's the big part of it. You got to know him, know his voice, because he will lead you into truth when the lie is perpetuating. And you'll believe the truth of God so much that you'll be willing to die because you see the deception so clearly and you know God. And then you will not be afraid to die. So who are these bodies? What exactly are they? Well, you know, I can only say that maybe they're able to conjure it up, not through magic, but through, you know, genetics, 3D printing, and that they can maybe, you know, there may be something there where they can encode DNA there. You know, I don't know, but I don't think it's beyond them to be able to do it.
Well,
That's a great point.
In Genesis 6, the sons of God came unto the daughters of men. Now, some people would argue that that does not mean they were actually having some type of sexual intercourse, but I think you could also say that they were able to manifest in it and in a humanoid type of form.
And you know what? Just while I'm thinking about this, because that's a great point. And I go back to Psalms 82, like Mike Heiser's work on this. But when he does, when God says in Psalms 82 that you will die like men, right? Now, I don't know. I'm just speculating, right? If we overlay that verse into Revelation, where God says that the stars of heaven will fall to earth like a fig tree is losing its leaves, right? I just wonder if that could somehow play into it, right? Where the restrainer's gone, boom, they're able to come, and they come, but they come with this deception. And so I say that speculative because there's different ways it could play out. But the fact that he says that you're going to die like men, maybe it's literal. Maybe it's not. I do think it fits in to the narrative if that's how it plays out, within those ambiguities.
That's a great verse. Yeah, because so they're going to fall like figs fall from a tree. So there's something going on. You know, it's really interesting in The Way of the Shaman. I forget who wrote that, but the author, I read it because my a family member was getting into that and not a believer, didn't believe in God. And so I read this book and I'm like, I think I believe this more than you believe it. He's like, whatever, and I'm like, dude, this is serious stuff. But anyway, when this guy had this trip on ayahuasca, he, you go to this point of near death, and then he saw in this vision all of these stars, these looking like stars falling from heaven to the earth, and they came up to him and they explained, while he's in this deep trance, that we are the actual rulers of earth, and we fled here to get away from our enemy out there, out in the heavens. Okay. And I'm like, hello. Right. So then he comes out of this trip and he goes and talks to the local priest or missionary, and the missionary takes him right to Revelation chapter 12. And he's like, look right there. And I'm like, hello. Right. But, so they have these moments of almost truth, I guess, where they tell you part of the story. And I think that very well could be that there's somehow there's the dimensional veil. Well, it'll eventually be taken away when Jesus comes back. But before that, I think it might have some holes in it, and they're able to pass through because certain conditions have changed. And I think part of that is going to be the restrainer, who I believe is actually Michael. I think when the restrainer is taken away, then they have access, because humanity is saying, please come. We want you to be here. And we're giving them the authority to come here at will. And so it'll be interesting, as you said, to see how that all plays out.
Well, I believe then when they really manifest is when they're essentially kicked out of the heavenly realm in Revelation. In other words, it's like, okay, now go down there. Now go there. You're down there full time until the end of the age now. You can no longer, Satan is no longer able to access the heavens as he did in Job and be the accuser of the brethren. And so with Michael standing down, to a certain extent, I don't really know how that plays. I just believe that once that happens over that final 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 year period, that it is literally it's going to be biblical up in here, like supernatural type of stuff.
Yeah.
Like cray. And that's where you were pointing out that the deception, the supernatural deception is going to be so great. And for those this is just, a lot of people are even again, I can never judge a person's heart, but I can talk to Christians and their biblical ignorance on what Scripture says, even if we have different understandings on it. Okay, but they're like even ignorant as to what it says. Like they never have read Revelation. They don't read 2 Thessalonians. They don't read. So unless they get a teaching from a pastor, and I don't want to start a fight. I don't know where you stand on this, but most of the pastors in America are teaching we're going to get raptured out of here anyway. So what do we got to worry about any of this stuff for? So it really don't need to know it. If you're in that part of the camp, all this stuff is really just fun to talk about. There's no need. There's no practical need. Because we're never going to have to face this deception. So that's my concern is what would happen. And then if people are still around, they're some of them are being, well, this can't be it. I'm still here.
Exactly. And you're right on point with that. I'm kind of I'll say at this point in my walk, I would consider myself like rapture agnostic. Like I'm not going to take a hard stand because I'll probably lose like half of the audience if I say, but I think we need to consider that to be a part of the deception, especially when it's really difficult to even come up with that theology. But nevertheless, Doug, I know you said that you think that the restrainer is Michael, and I'm kind of like agnostic on that part too. But I do agree with this idea that the church is going to fall away. Like, right? So if we're in 2 Thessalonians, we're going through that, we see the great apostasy, right? Where the great divorce from the church, the church is divorcing God, right? So again, what takes place where so many people fall away, right? Now, the alien deception fits really nicely in there, especially if Satan is playing the long game, which I contend he is that, and I mentioned it before, that my daughter, by the time she's 60, 70, 80 years old, if this thinking, if this worldview, alien savior, ancient aliens, panspermia, all of this nonsense keeps barreling down on our culture, on our global culture, we're not going to have a church in 100 years because it'll be a thing of the past. Well, we explained that away. They weren't angels, they weren't demons, they were aliens that came down and gave us our civilization. And look, they did create us because we have their DNA. But so it is. And that's why I say, and I'll just reiterate it too, because we talk about this stuff. It's fun. It's interesting. Like it gives us, hopefully it gives us that motivation to get to know our Creator better and to be able to worship him better, understand that God is not without a sense of storytelling here, because it's an awesome story. Right. And Jesus is at the center of that story. And yet, what's the prize? What's the inheritance? What's to gain? God gets his family, and that's beautiful. And we got to tell people that that's the gospel, man. God is in charge, not these demonic, fallen angel, alien, whatever, right? And it's so crazy because they're talking about they've been teaching evolution for so long in our schools that it's fact, right? And now they are literally to the point where an evolutionary biologist, Richard Dawkins, actually has an ancient alien theory on the table, you know, and he says that with 100% conviction that it's probably the case, and that the God of the Bible doesn't exist, and it's sad.
And it's essentially a game of kicking the evolutionary can down the road. So where did they?
That's right. Well, and Carl Sagan did the same thing in his novel Contact. You know, when I was reading that, I was like, okay, I want to hear how he thinks, even though it's a novel, but still, this is going to be his best speculation as to how we got here, you know. And lo and behold, you know, well, there was an ancient race before us, and then there was an even more ancient race before them, you know, and they were here for billions of years, and then they sort of died out, and then this other race came, and then they're still here, and now they're talking to you humans, right? So, you know, it always has to be the grand aliens, the grandparent aliens that are out there somewhere. And I like what you're saying, Mike. It's a story. And I think that's what we need to do is contextualize the gospel. You know, obviously I'm into, you know, let's go back in the history and let's understand that. But to understand the application for today is, you know, this isn't just little felt board figures that like, here's Jesus and the disciples and, you know, but this is God wanting to get back his world that was stolen. You know, Satan scammed our first parents, and they're like, oh, here you go, Satan, here are the keys of the planet. And, you know, and that's essentially what Jesus had to do, is to buy those back. And he had to do it legally. And that was the need for the cross. And the second coming is Satan saying, I'm not going to lose here. I'm going to win, and I'm going to find a way to scam you guys again. So you give me those keys back. And that's where God's like, yeah, this is where I got to step in, because humanity is so stupid. Basically, I think the apostasy is the leadership of Jerusalem, who is, in a sense, leading for all the earth, of giving away the keys to the planet again. And I think that is, you know, Michael is currently in that position. He's the guy that's standing watch over Daniel's people. And then they're going to say, oh, here you go. And that's from Isaiah 28:14. Woe to you, scornful men who rule this people who are in Jerusalem, who say, we've made a covenant with death and Sheol. That's the same dynamic duo that we have in Revelation chapter 6, death and Hades. And then they're given authority over 1/4 of the planet, not humanity, but the planet. And it just so happens that where do people live on this planet? 1/4 of the surface area of the planet is where people live. I mean, that blew my mind. All right. That was Tobler et al. That did that study back in 1997 or something like that. And I was like, no way. That's crazy. You know, so basically all of humanity, everywhere people live, are going to give away the authority to Satan, death, and Sheol, Hades, and say, here you go. And why would they do that? Because 2 witnesses are coming who are given this message from the big, mean, nasty alien god who says, you got to live according to my ways. You've got to come back to me. And the earth is like, we don't want to do that. We don't like you.
Little girls are girls and little boys are boys. How
yeah, exactly. You know, that kind of stuff. And he's saying, this is my planet. And the world's like, I don't think so. Right. And so it's fear that is going to motivate people to give away the farm, to give away the planet, as it were. And that's where Satan steps in and says, oh, I'm here to help. I'm your knight in shining armor. So, I mean, man, it's fascinating. I know you got to go. I know we're over time as usual, but and this has been
Told you.
awesome. I know we're always trying, never succeeding, but this has really been a lot of fun. So tell people again where they can find Camp Hermon online and et cetera, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we have a YouTube channel. Just search Camp Hermon. CampHermon.com is where you're going to find, our mission statement, find out what we're up to, what we're doing. And then of course, across the board in the podcast, you can find us just by searching Camp Hermon. And so, yeah, we love to hear from anybody and everybody. We want stories. We want theories. And, I'll even say this, if you got something cool, let us know what you got. We might have you on the show. So yeah, we've been working real hard, and just be looking for our docu-series this Christmas as well.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds really cool, that docu-series. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Scott. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching. Guys, be in prayer about Regenesis Code. It really is a story that has amazing potential. And so, check out the book. I've made it available for free on YouTube, so you can check that out if you want to buy it. That's awesome. That helps fund the next thing that we're doing. Book 2 will be coming out soon. Well, not soon, but we're working on it. Okay. So appreciate that. And if you want to help support this ministry, you can do that by going to patreon.com/Doug Hamp and give as little or as much as you want. So thank you. And until next time, guys, stay in the Word. God bless you and good night.